good afternoon, and welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elridge. I'm Lorna Virgilia, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Dr. Nina Ashford, who is the Chief of Public Health Services for Montgomery County. Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Deputy Chief of Public Health Services, Dr. James Bridgers, the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and joining us today, our special guest is Council President Kate Stewart. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And with that, good afternoon, Mr. County Executive.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I was a little late. I was coming from a doctor's appointment, and if I am a little hesitant sometimes reading, I had my eyes dilated, so I'm trying to focus on this as best I can. Thank you for joining us again. And, actually, nothing that we've seen over the first 48 hours of this new administration has been much of a surprise to us, but we understand that there are many in our county who are concerned, and given the executive orders, they probably should be. Although there are many issues that we in the county's executive's office work on with the council, few unify us in one voice as much as ensuring that all of our residents feel safe, secure, and heard here in Montgomery County. And I want to thank Council President Kate Stewart for joining me here today. President Trump continues to sign numerous executive orders and make plans that have the potential to impact people who live and work in Montgomery County. We're still reviewing most of them to understand how they would be implemented and what their impact's going to be. However, there were a few that are already concerning and, quite frankly, an affront to decency and courage. And I'll start out with the executive order that pardoned all of the January 6th rioters. Turning over their convictions and stopping further prosecutions is very troubling. This is probably, I guess, what makes it especially bizarre is the president was very adamant about how he felt about people who attacked police and, the toll that policing takes on police. And here he's pardoning 1,500 people who attacked police and actually killed one of them. This is of no small consequence, and I can assure you we had police department officers at the Capitol on January 6th, and we continue to have police officers dealing with trauma, physical and emotional, of that day. Pardoning everyone involved in this attempted takeover of democracy, otherwise known as a coup, is a chilling message to send to our law enforcement personnel and others. Perhaps this is just so much for law enforcement, law and order. It's also a sign of our sad state of affairs that President Biden had to issue pardon to those on the January 6th Select Committee, including our own Congressman Jamie Raskin, to preemptively protect them from political persecution. These lawmakers and aides were doing their jobs in investigating real crimes that happened right in front of our eyes. Another executive order withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement at a time when communities across the nation are feeling the impacts of climate change. Snow in Texas and Florida, wildfires in Southern California, hurricanes in the South, flash flooding in mountains in North Carolina, and mudslides on the East Coast. All of his actions are a step in the wrong direction. Montgomery County set ambitious climate goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2027 and to achieve a net zero emissions by 2035. These goals reflect the urgent need for climate action and our commitment to build a sustainable future. While we remain a leader in climate resilience, sustainability, investing in clean energy, expanding public transit, and adopting innovative programs to support our climate action plan, our current government's actions at the federal level will now hamper our efforts instead of enhancing them. And I got to ask, to what end is he adopting policies that hasten global warming other than to enrich the oil barons who supported him? I think even in the bigger picture, to try to shut down the windmill industry and to steer away from anything and all this tech out there that could help us address global warming. Anything you build could be built in America, whether it's windmills or heat pumps. These are all industries that could grow and prosper on an effort to fight global warming. And since we exist in a global world, any attack on the ability to diversify industry in the United States and to fall back on oil is ultimately something that's going to leave the United States less competitive in world markets, because around the world, people are going to be buying heat pumps and they're going to be installing windmills. And if the United States isn't selling them to people, somebody else will be. And the American economy is not big enough to survive a supplantation of our businesses in the rest of the world. So I hope some of the folks in the business community can get through to the president that this excessive vision of protectionism is not actually going to be good for American businesses. The other thing is, the president's actions to demonize immigrants are not simply mean-spirited, it's also counterproductive, often for the same reasons. Our immigrant neighbors are a vital fabric of our community and economy. Even in Maryland, there are immigrants who support the agricultural sector, but in the major agricultural baskets of the country, immigrant labor is absolutely crucial to the harvesting and planting of crops. And I'm not sure if he's fully thought out what's going to happen when there isn't anybody around to plant or harvest. I support Attorney General Brown's decision for Maryland to join the other states in a lawsuit filed this week to challenge President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship, something that is actually in the Constitution of the United States. We're also hearing from our LGBTQ plus community who are outraged and concerned about the executive order to dismantle legal and social recognition of transgender people. Last year, I was proud to support the General Assembly's Trans Shield Act, legislation that was co-sponsored by Delegate David Moon and the majority of the House delegation, that ensured that those states that ban gender-affirming care can't use private health records against transgender Marylanders and their physicians. It's sad and scary that this community, which is already suffering from high suicide rates and is often alienated from their own families, is now being victimized by its own federal government. New orders would also effectively shut down an array of programs and practices aimed at reversing decades of systemic inequities and discriminatory practices that have disproportionately affected Black Americans. I think it was this morning that anybody working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the federal government have all been placed on paid leave, pending, I'm sure, another way of resolving their employment in the federal government, because he's made it clear all those programs no longer exist. As I mentioned to the crowd that gathered at Strathmore during our county's MLK Day celebration, this county is not going to waver in our commitment to diversion, equity, and inclusion. And at the core, these guys want to pretend that slavery never happened, or sometimes in the case of Ron DeSantis, that slavery was actually good for people. I will now turn this over to County Council President Kate Stewart, who's come in at a great time in the world to become the president of Montgomery County Council. But thank you for being here today. And after she's finished, we'll take questions from you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me today to join today's media briefing. And I think it's really important that both of us are here today, like we were together at the Strathmore to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. Because it shows that Montgomery County leaders are united in service and support for all of our residents. With the new administration, our first priority here in Montgomery County is to our community members and doubling down on Montgomery County's commitment to being a safe and inclusive place to live, work, worship, and raise a family. And as the county exec said, what this means specifically is that regardless of changes in administration, here in Montgomery County, we're going to continue our work on racial equity to ensure our policies we pass are advancing equity and dismantling historic institutionalized racism. It means we're going to continue providing funding and services for our LGBTQ plus community and make sure that Montgomery County continues to protect the rights of our LGBTQ plus residents. We will continue to work with, protect, and serve immigrants as we do all our residents. We will assist those in the federal workforce who call Montgomery home, and we will make sure that pregnant individuals continue to have access to the best reproductive care and control over their health care decisions. It is our intent to mitigate any potential harm by maintaining and providing local county services, and the first step of that is making sure our residents are informed. And we did that together in early December when we held the resource fair to make sure that residents are aware of what is available here in Montgomery County and where they can turn for assistance. We need to make sure that our residents know their rights, because that's a key component to battling misinformation. And we know we have a great resource here in Montgomery County working with our local nonprofits who provide that training. We're going to come up on budget season very soon here in Montgomery County, and making sure that we have our safety net services and the resources necessary to support all of our community is going to be front and center in our conversations. Here in Montgomery County, we remain steadfast in our commitment to support our residents and will continue to lift up values of inclusion, connection, and compassion across our diverse community. Additionally, we're going to continue to promote policies and maintain community safety, combat hate and discrimination in all its forms. So I'll end by just saying, we are steadfast in our values. We're resolute in standing with and for those being attacked, and we're tireless in moving our county and our economy forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Members of the media, we are going to open it up right now. And I see a lot of hands up already. And the questions that we'll take now, they're going to be for the Council President and the County Executive regarding the proposed changes at the federal level and possible impact in Montgomery County. So Kate Ryan, WTOP, go ahead. Good afternoon, Kate. You might need.
There we go. Yep.
There you go. Okay.
Thank you so much. I had a question for both the county executive and the council president and I've already contacted the schools on this. What are your concerns regarding the Trump administration's intent on removing the sensitive designation to schools for enforcement of ICE and Border Patrol enforcement efforts? And what are the legal strictures on that? Because schools, I know, are a state entity. Where does that stand? And are you in touch with police on whether they would take part in this? Because it seems very complicated.
Well, at one level, our police don't do federal enforcement. So then whatever enforcement is going to be done is going to be done by the federal government. We are trying to get some clarity on some of these issues. I just read the bit about churches and schools, and we have protocols, for example, for if somebody comes into a school and says they want to see a person, they usually have to explain why they want to see them. And so we haven't yet had a conversation with the school board, but I assure you we will be having that conversation shortly about what exactly they have to do and what they don't have to do. But we're really worried about it. I'm very worried about it. And, after all the talk about going after the hardcore criminals, I wonder how many hardcore criminals they're going to find in elementary school. That should be very interesting. Kate?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kate, for the question. I think this is something that we have all been preparing for over the last couple of months. And I will say I've had conversations with our superintendent, and this has been very top of mind for him. I will say my conversations with the superintendent and what Montgomery County schools are doing is preparing their principals, their school faculty. In the case of ICE showing up at the schools, they have information that they've been sharing also with families to make sure that they have appropriate paperwork that they would need. And so, as the county exec said, we need to be looking into the legal issues here. But the most important thing we can be doing right now is sharing information with our school staff, with our families, to make sure that they're prepared.
Got it. And is there any indication that this would be restricted to high schools, secondary schools versus elementary?
I have no idea what they're going to do at this point. That's why we've got to read this order more carefully and see what they actually intend to do regarding implementation.
Gotcha. And where do you get and last question, where do you get your legal advice on the, and again, I'm asking because I truly don't know the intersection of local versus federal here. Do you go through the AG's office, the county attorney?
We go through the county attorney. Obviously, the school system had their attorney, and I'm sure they've had the same discussions. We're also in contact with the AG's office, and we're going to continue as issues come up to get an evaluation from them and possibly some others about what the implications of it are. I think the clearest thing, particularly out of something that the Fed sent out yesterday, was this idea that the county government can't interfere in anything. And that's, frankly, we've never interfered with them before. The county government never put itself between people and said, you can't do this or you can't do that. So I don't anticipate, I don't know where they think that was coming from, but we haven't done that. We'll see what our lawyers tell us, but we'll do whatever the law requires us to do.
Got it. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Kate. Ryan, Brad Bell, ABC7. Good afternoon, Brad.
Good afternoon. Hello, Mr. County Executive. So, along the same vein, there's a new reporting out that the Department of Justice has told U.S. attorneys across the country to investigate and perhaps prosecute local officials who don't fully cooperate with their plans to carry out mass deportations. Well, so I mean, the question would be then, what is your reaction to that notion? I mean, you've already gotten that letter, right? Supposedly that from the the organization that said, hey, we're watching you guys, and now here's apparently an explicit, if not implied, threat that they're going to come after you if you don't fully cooperate, however they define cooperating.
Well, they don't get to define cooperating any way they want to. Whatever cooperating means has to be legal. But we will get an opinion about what orders are legal and what we comply with, but we certainly don't see ourselves. And, I've made it clear to, the immigrants I've talked to that the county's not going to be able to stand between the police, federal police, and ICE agents. If they come here, we don't have the ability to do that. That would surely be interference in the carrying out of an executive order. So I don't see that happening. So this particular nuance of their argument may never come to pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add, Brett, that, as local officials, we're responsible for upholding the rights of our residents and also maintaining our own local authority. And so that means, as the county exec has said, getting the legal advice on this. But as we've discussed, enforcement of immigration laws is a federal responsibility, and our responsibility here in Montgomery County is to our residents and making sure they have the most up-to-date information on protecting themselves and keeping their families safe.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Good luck.
Thank you, Brad. Gina Bixby, Local 360.
Hi, Lorna.
Hi.
Brad and Kate stole some of my questions. But I do have a follow-up for both of you, and kind of related. I'm going to bring another topic into this. So both of you have spoken a bit about making sure people know their rights, both in the immigrant community and in the LGBTQ community. Are there any specific plans of, I know it's the bad word, but funding or any other increased programming? I know last budget session, it was a real point of contention with some of the LGBTQ organizations that they weren't getting as much funding as they'd like, and that they were being relied on for a lot of services. So with both of these groups, and also understanding that these groups can intersect, is there going to be an increased effort to make sure to meet people where they are and make sure that they are aware of their rights and aware of services? And I know I've talked a little bit to the council president about this in the past, but if both of you have any information just in light of the executive orders this week.
I don't see the executive orders changing what we're going to do. We've got programs out there at multiple levels. We, like everybody else in the state, we will work hard to fund as much as we can. We're still not quite sure where we're going to be on revenues. No matter how much we want to do things, sometimes revenues ultimately are a limiter of what you decide to do. But the county's been able to do a lot in the past, and I anticipate we're going to continue to do a lot now. But I'm not sure what additionally you provide, and particularly in the case of the immigrants, if we can't, like, for example, we can't provide shelter and say this is safe shelter. That would be a violation of the federal order immediately. So there's very limited things we can do. We've got clothing programs, we've got food programs, we've got access to health care. Those things I expect to continue.
Where would be the best place if folks are reading what I'm putting out? Where you're talking about a lot of these programs. How can they access these programs? Where's the best place to kind of find this information within the county?
So, just to jump in on the county executive, we set up on the council website after the resource fair a page that folks can go to access many of the resources that were at the fair. And we're also linking to the Montgomery County Public Schools has a great deal of information up on their website as well. But Jeannie, also to answer your question as well, I think the county has had a history and a reputation, as we've seen, when things are endangering our residents, of stepping in. We did this after the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. We did this with setting up the security grants for our religious institutions and others that may be targets of hate and discrimination. So I think right now, as we're digesting these executive orders and the impact they'll have on our community, we need to be in constant contact with members of our community and the nonprofits who serve them. It may not be additional resources. It may be hearing from some folks flexibility in some of the that they receive from the county now to shift some of those funds to providing different services than they anticipated they would have to. And I do just want to note and thank the county executive, because we were able in the budget last year to provide the LGBTQ plus community, the MoCo Pride Center, with $500,000 in the budget. And that has been crucial in them really stepping up and providing many of the resources that we've needed and are going to need over these next 4 years.
Thank you. I appreciate the web page, because I know not everybody reading it will be able to spend hours like I can looking at all the resources. So
I was going to say, Ginny, we're actively actually working with something on the Pride Center that we're not quite ready to announce yet, but I'll follow up with you when it's ready to go, because I think it addresses in part what some of the things you're trying to get to with additional access to services and spaces for the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Marianne Shassad, Montgomery Community Media. Good afternoon, Marianne.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm wondering, does the county have any idea of how many residents here have birthright citizenship in the county? And then for Council President Stewart, I'm wondering, just as a District 4 representative, have you heard from any of those residents?
Earl, do you know any of the numbers? Have we managed to get a number of birthright? I'm not quite sure how we know who they were.
I don't know because they're simply
right.
U.S. citizens right now. So I don't know that we'd be able to discern. I've seen the numbers, nationally, it's 1 in 13 active births right now would qualify under the way the executive order is drafted as not being eligible for citizenship. So obviously that's a big number. And, because it's a pretty broad, it's not just people born of undocumented immigrants, it's people born of those on temporary visas like student visas or work visas as well. And so it's broad. And so I don't even know how we would begin to capture how many people currently have birthright citizenship as defined by this executive order.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think everyone is still, as the county exec stated before, is, we're in the first 48 hours and people are still digesting and trying to understand how this impacts our country, our community, and then them personally and their families. And so we've been hearing a lot from residents across the board on many of these issues, and I still think everyone's still trying to process what it means for them.
And the one, if I may, the one piece I would add to what the Council President just said, many of these executive orders mandate that departments, executive branch, federal executive branch agencies develop guidance or implementation steps. And much of the details of the impact, the timelines, the way that the terms are being defined will be set by those executive regulations. And we'll have a lot more understanding at that point what the implications will be. I think the key to understand is that many of these executive orders do not have an immediate effect. They have some timeline whereby the respective departments that they speak to are expected to implement them. And so while we have seen, for example, changes in the federal remote work and telework expectations immediate, the DEI things were immediate, many of the other executive orders require some additional documentation be developed by different departments. And we won't have a good sense of exactly the immediate implications until those guidelines are released.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariam. Dana Monroe, The Washington Post. Good afternoon.
Well, I have two questions about the DOJ memo. And the first one is, you guys got the letter from Stephen Miller basically saying you have some sort of sanctuary policy, considering you a sanctuary jurisdiction, even if you guys don't yourself. And that makes me imagine that there's like a work group that the DOJ mentioned in the memo, that a work group about sanctuary cities and examining their policies. Is there any policy that you're concerned about or you're going to proactively change so that you're not under attack from DOJ when they do that inspection, or just sort of wait and see what they find and what they tell you?
I don't want to try to anticipate what they're going to do and proactively make adjustments if, in fact, we may not ever have to proactively make adjustments. I don't want to take something away from people that's important because we're afraid they might do it. I'm honestly not quite sure how much they're going to find that that is in the way of their immigration policy, or some of the other things in terms of sanctuary. I mean, sanctuary largely meant historically, that the county or jurisdiction was welcoming, it was going to be inclusive, and would make sure that people came there had access to services. They may look at how much of our money is federal money. In fact, I know that because I saw them one of the orders. They're going to look at how much federal money is going to services that can be used by anybody, and will probably tell us we can't use the federal money, and we'll have to make an adjustment to that if the money is being used by undocumented people. But those are the kind of things we need clarity on, and that's what we're going to be looking for, is the clarity to know, what are the exact things that we're liable for. And probably the jail policy, which frankly, Montgomery County is not a sanctuary city. And if you even ask our friends in the immigrant community who wanted us to have little stronger policies, our policies never, crossed the border of sanctuary. So we were turning over violent criminals when we had them. And if that's all they wanted to do was go after people who committed violent crimes, I don't think we'd have a lot of debate about it. Mm-hmm. But there's a whole lot of debate over going after, a minor shoplifting, particularly. I mean, I could refer to them as Jean Valjean crimes. I don't know if anybody's old enough to have read the book, but here's somebody who stole a loaf of bread because he needed to feed his family. I mean, those things, I'm not interested in. Most other people, and frankly, ICE officials told us they weren't interested in that. They were interested in people who they saw as violent or drug traffickers, or otherwise posing a threat to the community. And most of the crimes probably don't pose a threat to the community. So we'll see. We'll see where they go, and then we'll be stuck having to deal with it.
It leads to my second question. The DOJ memo talked a lot about violent criminals, but also just deporting any undocumented people and mandating that localities comply with any request from them, basically. Do you guys have a plan if they do come asking for people with traffic violations or low-level crimes?
Look, they have access. Anytime somebody gets arrested, it gets put up on a national board. You know, it's not a communications type board. So they know anybody who's been in and out of our jail if they want to. That's how they know to come to us sometimes for a warrant. You know, for the removing a person from the country, though largely people who did violent crimes. So I assume they've got access to that information if someone's arrested. They have not made a lot of effort to go after all the low-level stuff. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they'll stay that way. But, you know, again, we're not going to preemptively change something until we know exactly who they want. And, you know, they say one thing, we want the violent criminals, and then they talk about access to schools and churches. It's just hard to see what the actual game plan is here. And if he does get rid of everybody, good luck harvesting and planting your crops next year. Even in Montgomery County, we have a large agricultural community, and we have many migrant workers who work here during the seasons.
Last question. Will you guys be reaching out to the feds or your lawyer reach out to get this clarity, or you're just going to wait until it's more publicly revealed?
Earl, you can talk about this some, but, you know, we've been in discussions with them. It's not like, you know, we're waiting for shoes to drop. We've tried to be proactive. And Earl, you want to describe what you think, what you feel like comfortable talking about?
I mean, we have operational level conversation. I've been texting with someone in ICE while we've been on this call, because we've gotten a question about whether there was a particular event that happened in Montgomery County today, and it didn't. And so we have operational conversations with ICE to, you know, are you guys doing an activity here? We got to, you know, just those kinds of rumor mill conversations. And so we have an interaction with them. And as the county executive alluded to, where there is alignment is around addressing these real threats to public safety and addressing violent crime, for example. And so we'll have conversations with them that are around those. Much of these conversations, though, are not happening at the operational level that we work with at ICE. They're happening at the central office, and we'll be waiting for guidance to be issued from the central office, and then it'll be disseminated through all the regional offices, and we'll have a better sense of what the implications are, both in Maryland but across the country. And then the other thing, obviously, we'll be reacting to is if they do particular operational activities, not in Maryland or anywhere across the country, because then we'll understand about a lot more about what the possibilities that we could face in Montgomery County. And so, you know, it's one of those things where we're trying to get, you know, a lot of what has been released so far are high level policy pronouncements that they're not fully operational until till the department itself develops some of these operational guidelines, and we have a better understanding of what the rules of the road are, the expectations, what we'll be asked to do. But I think that's sort of where we're at now, is we're kind of taking this day by day until additional hard information is released, so we have a better understanding of what the expectations are, and then it'll be up to the county executive and the elected officials to determine what our policy is going to be with regard to those changing expectations.
Thanks, that's super helpful.
Thank you, Dana. Members of the media, any additional questions for, I see Tom Fitzgerald, Fox 5DC. Good afternoon, Tom. Go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate you doing the call today. There were just two thoughtful questions on the DOJ memo. So let me ask you a less thoughtful question.
Okay.
Are you worried about Donald Trump trying to put you in jail?
No.
Why not?
Because we haven't done anything that violates federal law. You know, even our jail policy is, you know, a policy based on a ruling from the Attorney General from Maryland. So we stay within the law. We have not ever what they call harboring in my mind, harboring is opening the door to your house and hiding somebody in it. We don't take people and hide them anywhere. They know where the homeless shelters are. They know where the schools are. They know where training, where people do job training. They know all this stuff. So we're not harboring anybody. Nobody's sequestered and hidden from them.
But given the proximity of Montgomery County to Washington, D.C., Republicans have liked to point to the District of Columbia and its Democratic majority government. Are you concerned at all, or are you got the message from them that you're on their radar screen on this stuff? Because it does seem like the administration has liked to go around and find Democratic local governments and hold them up as examples.
Well, I think they're in a hard time holding us up as an example because our policies have always been tempered somewhat. Like I said, we actually worked with them on our jail policy, and they were largely happy with, the kind of agreement we had because they weren't interested in everybody. They were interested in a certain group of people. And we've been able to have, constructive conversations around that. And the rest of the stuff we do doesn't violate any law. It just reflects the values of this community. And they may not like it, and they may cut off federal funds, which I think, in the sense of being targeted, I absolutely think we're likely to get targeted by having our funds cut off. That is, I think, for sure something I cannot protect against. But, we're not as dependent as some other jurisdictions are. And, we'll have to, if the funds go away, the funds will go away. It'll have consequences. We'll either be able to replace them or not replace them. But we can do a lot of things that we're not going to be able to do with federal funds. I mean, we can do DEI stuff and teach it, and we can talk about it, and we can, apply it in the work we do. We can do that all day long. I just can't use any federal money to do it.
But so, when Tom Holman, this border czar, says that he's going to put local officials in jail who stand in their way, you see that as an empty threat?
No, I don't want to say empty threat. We just have never stood in their way. I mean, I think we've tried to say this multiple different ways on this call. We are not putting our police or our people between ICE agents and the people they're coming for. It wouldn't work. Everybody would be arrested immediately, and they would go ahead and do what they were going to do anyway. I don't, it's like you don't pick a fight with somebody you can't beat up. And we certainly can't do that. So I'm going to do whatever we can do. We're collectively going to do whatever we can do to keep people safe. That's what we're going to try to do. But you will not find us standing between them and the people that if they actually try to take people. That's not something we can do.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I was the last time we had a Trump administration, I was the mayor in the city of Tacoma Park, and as the county exec said at that time, we were also threatened and looked at the funding that we were getting at the federal level, and our community rallied here in the city of Tacoma Park and in Montgomery County to make sure that we were able to continue services to individuals who needed them in the community. And I expect the same thing will happen again if we lose federal funding.
Well, ICE has previously said that Montgomery County was not honoring detainers or informing ICE of individuals that were being released who had detainers on them. Has that been resolved, or are we going to see a restart of that dispute in the future?
We'll see what they say.
Gotcha.
We left our last meeting in a good place in terms of agreement about notification and when. And that was before all this.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Members of the media, any additional questions for the county executive? I see. Oh, okay. Dana Murmur, your hand's up again. Good afternoon again. You didn't mean that, did you? Okay. Diego Gutierrez, Univision DC. Good afternoon, Diego.
Good afternoon. More than a question is just if you two both can send a message for the Hispanic community in this moment. Yeah, a message for because many of the Hispanic community are like a fair that would be detained by the ICE or they cannot access to benefits. Could you send a message for them to say that something's gonna be okay? Maybe that there is nothing that they cannot go out to the streets and will be detained because, for example, we received so many messages between yesterday and today and say that if they will pass a red light, they will be arrested, they will be separated from the families. So there is a lot of fear in the Hispanic community right now. So any message for them, like a piece to calm down what they're thinking?
We're not at the point where there are ICE agents patrolling the streets and looking for people that they can, deport or ask for papers. I'm pretty sure you can go to a grocery store and, carry out much of your normal life. What we can't control is what happens if they decide to go after lower level people. They will have to use the information they have and they'll make the decisions they're going to make, and the county's not going to be able to stop that. And I don't want to tell people that the county is going to be there the bar of the way, because we can't. What we can do is make sure that if we've got health programs that are running now, you can go and get health care. If we have food programs, you can go and get food. Those things you can do.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, as I stated before, we're going to continue to work with and serve our Hispanic community, all of our communities, and as we are figuring out the legal issues and what these executive orders mean, we want to work with our members of our community and make sure that they have all the information that they need for their families. And so I really can't encourage people enough to get on the Council's website where these resources are available, and the Montgomery County Public Schools websites where there are links to different types of forms and documents that you can fill out to make sure that you are protecting your family and that you have all you need in place as we're figuring out what this all means for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. Dana Monroe, I see your hand up again.
Yes, just a quick last question. Sort of related, but not. The U visa legislation that's going through, do we know how many people in the county have U visas?
You know, Dr. Stoddard?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think that's something we could find out. I'd have to look it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, I see Judy Earth with the Greater Olney News has a question. Good afternoon, Judy.
Oh, thank you. Mine is sort of a follow-up of Diego's question, and that is, I'm getting emails and texts and calls from people who are saying, we're doomed, we're in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. Who needs to be afraid? Should anybody in Montgomery County be afraid of anything? Either the federal workers, the citizenship, people worried about their citizenship, anything. You've done a very nice job laying out the systematic direction that you all are taking, but does anyone need to be afraid of anything?
Look, to be honest, I mean, if I were an immigrant from the countries that they're focusing on, I would be afraid, because they're not going to give us advance warning and say, oh, by the way, we're coming tomorrow. These will be raids meant to catch people who aren't prepared. So if they do that and you see it start happening, I would worry. I don't know any other way to say it. I mean, there's no way to stop them. There's no way to stop them from doing that if that's the path they go down. for, our federal employees, I feel really bad. The fact that all these people in the DEI field, are now like on furlough until probably they're eliminated. I think 1,000 federal appointees were eliminated yesterday. I guess these are people who were qualified as political appointees, and he has the right to fire them and replace them. So I worry about things like that. That'll destabilize your income and your ability to be financially solvent, which would not be good for anybody. And some of the other stuff is just a removal of federal protections, but it doesn't mean that we don't have protections in our own county or in the state of Maryland. Abortion is an example. We just codified that into the Constitution. So their trans legislation that's passed in Maryland that applies to Maryland residents, that would not, I don't think, be subject to the feds attacking people, because we haven't done anything that violates the Constitution, and their law applies to their policy. So I'd worry if I'm in particular classes, but I don't know what to say about things in general, except for worrying about our neighbors. We should worry about that.
Yeah. And Judy, I would, I appreciate your question. I think as we're entering this time, I'm holding on to a number of different things. And I think there was a quote from Nelson Mandela that said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." It would be hard not to be fearful. And that has been the case since the election, because of the rhetoric that's being used to stoke fear and divisiveness. And what we need to do is come together as a community, and in the ways that we can support each other and make sure that we have in place the services for our residents. And so we can feel fear, and I know folks are. I mean, personally, I have family and friends, and this is a time that is very trying for all of us. But we can't let that fear stop us from being there for each other, for standing up for each other, for making sure that people have their basic needs met, and getting through this time together.
Thank you, Council President. Members of the media, any additional questions for the Council President or the County Executive regarding this topic this afternoon? No more questions about this? Council President, thank you for joining us today. We know that you might have to depart. Thank you for being here for about an hour or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kate, thank you very much. I think it's important that people recognize that, the county, regardless of which side of the government we sit on, we have a lot of shared values that we're going to continue to pursue.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of shared values, this weekend, I'm going to be joining you at our 45th annual Women's Legislative Briefing organized by Montgomery County Commission for Women. And we're going to be joined by Senator Van Hollen, Lieutenant Governor Miller, and Comptroller Learman to talk to leaders from our county and around the state about issues facing women and the legislative work ahead of us at both the state and local level and the federal level as well. Not only is this an important anniversary for this event, it's an important time for this gathering, and I hope you'll consider attending and covering the event. Tomorrow, I'm going to join county leaders, families and friends of Lieutenant Christopher Higgins in paying tribute to a hero. As many of you know, he was a 23-year volunteer member of the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service who died this month answering a call for help. The public is invited to the Lighthouse Church in Glen Burnie for a public ceremony. Fire personnel from far and wide will also be there, and information about this service will be available on MCFRS blog site. Those lucky enough to know Chris had the utmost respect for him. He was a mentor and a role model and a firefighter who could have climbed the career ladder But he chose not to. He actually preferred to remain a master firefighter because he enjoyed his role. Last week, he was posthumously elevated to the rank of lieutenant. I didn't mean to say volunteer before. He was actually a career firefighter. And our community will join his loved ones in continuing to mourn his loss. So I'll be going to a funeral tomorrow. Next Wednesday evening, January 29th, more than 150 volunteers will help Montgomery County with a point in time count for individuals and families experiencing homelessness. The count will identify people staying at our shelters, residing on our streets and cars and outdoors. Know that the majority of people counted do have some shelter, however inadequate it might be, but they're not often out in these dangerously cold temperatures. But if they are unsheltered, and you should come across someone who's unsheltered, we encourage them to take advantage of our emergency shelters. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a 70% increase in homelessness and a steep rise in families in need of help. Several factors are to blame. Those include rising rents unjustified by inflation and the ending of pandemic-era rental assistance. We strive to make homelessness a one-time occurrence when someone experiences it. Montgomery County is fortunate to have a compassionate leadership at all levels, dedicated staff who really care about serving people, and a robust infrastructure that lets us help as many people as we do. Yet, no matter everything we do, we still see people struggling. The information gathered during this count is used at the local levels and federal levels to allocate resources for individuals and households that require assistance with homelessness. So please share this email with those interested in helping us count. The email is hhspit@montgomerycountymd.gov. Anyone experiencing a housing emergency can dial 311 to be connected with our housing stabilization services. On a happy note, during this time of year, many of our communities are preparing for the Lunar New Year on Wednesday, January 29th. The holiday gives us several opportunities to celebrate the heritage, culture, and incredible contributions of our Asian American communities. Montgomery County is proud to be home to 4 of the nation's 10 most diverse cities. And our diversity is not just a statistic, but a testament to our community's inclusivity and welcoming spirit. The last census found more than 160,000 Asian residents in Montgomery County, comprising 16% of our population. They're the second fastest growing community in the county. And on our trips to China and South Korea, Taiwan, India, and Vietnam, we were consistently hearing from people who were familiar with Montgomery County. Some, I met people who had graduated from Montgomery College, who were not, American nationals, and others who worked at FDA, worked at NIH, worked at companies, some of them set up companies. All of them had experiences here in Montgomery County, and were really helpful. We were addressing broader audiences to talk about their own experiences in the county and why this was a good place to come to. That's when you know that the work you do is getting through, is when people who live here are telling other people that this is a good place to come and live. We've built a reputation as a community where diversity thrives, and we should be proud of that. Lunar New Year celebration is always a highlight of every year. One of the things I love about Lunar New Year is that they celebrate it for almost 2 months, giving people multiple opportunities to interact with friends in their communities and celebrate their hopes for the new year. So I look forward to attending these festivities. They are always very interesting. At this time, I'm giving my health team and other county leaders an opportunity to share any updates before opening it up to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. So on the respiratory illness front, we are still near the high point for respiratory season, and we continue to recommend source control precautions for people that are symptomatic or trying to avoid exposure, which basically means wear a mask. Especially, we are recommending you wear a mask if you are in a healthcare setting. Also, if folks have not noticed, it is a little cold outside. So we wanted to briefly touch on some winter weather precautions. If you need to go outside, please, we would like to emphasize wearing multiple layers of clothing, including hats and gloves and insulated footwear. If you have the ability, try to limit your outdoor exposure, especially during these extreme cold temperatures. And if you need to be outside, take frequent breaks to try and warm up. Also, a friendly reminder, as it might be colder in our homes as well, please try to avoid using things like stoves or ovens or open flames to heat your homes, and monitor space heaters and make sure that they are at least 3 feet away from flammable items. If you are outside, it is important to recognize hypothermia. So some of those early signs include things like shivering or slurred speech, confusion, or drowsiness. And if you happen to see any of these coming on, it's really important to seek out a warm space and medical attention if it becomes severe. We also want you to prevent frostbite. So that could be numbing or numbness or discoloration, or your skin feeling a little waxy. So again, as I mentioned earlier, trying to cover exposed skin and stay dry, avoid tight clothing that restricts any circulation. So now is a great time to check on the older adults, our elderly neighbors and individuals, make sure that their heating systems are functional. Also, as a reminder, all of our county libraries and rec centers can be used as warming spaces during the day, and our shelters are also open and available. So please stay safe, stay warm out there, and hopefully we have a change in the weather coming in the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashford. The only thing I would add, in keeping consistent with the cold weather hypothermia theme, we have a hypothermia hotline. I remind folks that the number is 240-907-2688. Should you see someone in need, someone who is homeless or displaced, please contact our hypothermia hotline to help those who may be in need.
Thank you, Dr. Ashford and Dr. Bridgers. Members of the media, do you have any additional questions for the county executive and health officials this afternoon? Please raise your hand. No more questions? Going once, twice? Well, thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.